Hello again. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how we can make data into a scatterplot diagram. I'm going to be focusing on a couple things. First, of course, the mechanics of making the actual chart in Excel. And I'm also going to be discussing the ways that we can format it so it's in line with APA standards, as well as making it as effective as possible for the reader. So first things first, we got to have some data. This is some fabricated data that I have here that we can use. Now, normally, of course, we'd be running a correlation analysis on this just to see what we have, but one of the things that we always want to do when we're doing correlations is to actually plot it so we can see what kind of distribution that we have. So this is going to be the first step you want to do anyway. Now, the essentials for making any kind of chart in Excel are pretty universal. We always go to Insert up here, and that gives us all the selections and options that we can have to make a chart. In this case, I want to make a scatter chart. So if I go down here, we can see this one with the little dots on it is Insert Scatter, and that's exactly what I want to do. There's a couple ways that you can go about this. The first way is you can do it raw, I guess it would be, here, and just say, this is going to eventually be a scatter plot. I just need a place to start working. That's one way we can do it. Another way that we can do it is to actually select all the data that we want to form the chart. Now notice here I'm not putting in the ID. The ID is not a part of the chart itself. Well, all we want for a scatterplot is the scores on the X and the Y, right? So we can do it this way. I go to Insert, I go to Scatter, and there we go. Notice it automatically fills it in there. Okay, so those are two ways that we can do it. I tend to prefer working from a blank slate. So I'm going to show you what that looks like just so we can see where we have to go when we do this kind of data selection. Alright, so when we get this blank slate right here, we right click and it gives us a bunch of options. One of them is to select data. I open that and the data selection pane opens up here. Now from here I make sure the cursor is in chart data range and I just select my data. Okay. When this happens, notice it allows me the opportunity to see what kind of data we have going on here. And to also confirm it down here. Okay, so thus far all good. Now, one of the things in terms of formatting is oftentimes you'll find in other fields that a variety of vertical and horizontal lines and so on and so forth are included. Those aren't particularly helpful to us typically. We want the least amount of information to get the job done. In this case, all these vertical and horizontal lines don't really add much to it. They, in fact, kind of give us the impression that there's some kind of a coordination system here that we're using, and that's not true. So I like to delete those. If you look at APA, they don't tend to have all sorts of lines going around as well. So I'm going to click on specifically the vertical line. And there's a couple ways you can do this. This is the way that I like to do it. It's the fastest for me. But notice now I've got these little blue circles on the ends. That gets rid of, basically it's selecting, you can see here, the bounds of each one of these lines. I just select them and delete them. Okay, so there's the first step. Second step is in APA, the chart title does not appear within the chart. It's actually part of the text, right? So we don't need a chart title. I'm going to delete that. Select it and hit delete. Okay, now that we've got this, oops, did not mean to drag that. I'm going to select the whole chart just so I can move it a little bit and space it out. I want to constrain proportions, and to do that, you hold down Shift, then go to the edge here, bottom right, left, top right, top left. Any of these will work, but you get this slanted arrow bar. I'm just going to click that, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and notice no matter where I go, it constrains the proportion. I'm going to do that just so I have a better idea of what we're looking at. Okay, so thus far looking at this, it looks a lot more like a constellation or star chart than it does something that could actually be helpful to us. The next step we have to do is think about our scaling. Now when it comes to scaling, usually what we're trying to achieve is that we have the data centered within the chart area. This is actually, this can be misleading, all this space. If you mess with the scaling too much, you can really alter and manipulate the way data looks. So you have to keep that in mind. But in this case, I just want to bring this bit into frames so that I can see where all these data points live. Okay? So to do that, what I'm going to do is select the whole chart. And, no, actually, I want to select the axes down here. Right? These are the things that these marks down here, numbers down here, are going to control how expansive the possible data would be. So I'm going to click that. I know I've got it when there's a box just around the numbers. Then I right click. Oops. Come on. There we go. Oh, actually, in this version it doesn't do that. Okay. Okay, there we go. In this 2013 version, I have to double click. But what we're trying to get to is format axis. And there are other ways you can get to the format axis area as well. For example, here's some more ways you can format axes. And what I'm really looking for, though, is here. Right? Immediately it comes to this axis options box. And in the axis options box, you'll notice we have units and bounds and where the vertical axes cross. Right? Right now it's set to minimum, which is standard. We want the origin to be 0. In this case, because this is describing data, it does not need to be at 0. So if I look at here where I get close to minimums, looks to be 150. If I really want to be specific about this, I should look at my data itself. And 150 actually looks pretty good for this because I'm not seeing anything below 150. So I'm going to make my minimum 150. Okay, see? And now it kind of spreads out better, gets us a better view. And I want to replicate that as closely as possible on the vertical, on the y-axis here. And it looks like 150 is also a good choice for that. Let me just make sure. Y-axis. Right, so score 1 is x, score 2 is y. Yeah, also 150. So I select my verticals. There we go. And I go over here to the axis options. And I want that also to be 150. Okay, there. So now we've got a much better view of the axis. Whenever possible, it is good to try to make the origin still about the same number because what that allows us to do is to maintain some fidelity across our scales. It makes it less manipulated when we do it that way. All right, so now we've got a basic scatter plot. Now the next thing that we need to contend with is most of the time when we're making these things, we're having publication of some kind in mind. And because of that, we have to remember that not every publication is going to be doing things in color. And colors do not always show up the same in grayscale. We can fix that problem at the outset just by changing the color ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on one of these little data points. Notice a bunch of them get selected. And I'm going to go here to the fill in line. Right? Notice now I got line or marker as options here. Click on marker. And there's our color. Right now it's got it as a blue. I'm going to change that to a black. All printers can deal with black. Now one of the things you notice, if you look really closely, you can see a little blue outline. Right? We don't really need an outline. We don't need a border around this, around our guys here. So I'm going to click on those again. And notice down here we got border and it's set to automatic with that color blue. No line. I don't want anything on there. Okay? Now it's just black dots. The idea is we want enough information so that someone could basically take a ruler and trace to the y-axis as well as the x-axis and come up with basically what score the person would have. Okay. To make that easier, one of the things that's always a good idea to have would be tick marks. To get tick marks, what we do is we again go to the axis itself, right? And we go to the axis options. And notice one of the options here is tick marks. I'm going to select tick marks, and I use major tick marks. You can also use minor, but usually I want it to represent what data they can see down here, or information they can see down here, excuse me. Ooh. Need to get a drink of some, sorry. Getting a little dry over here. Okay, major type. I prefer the outside. And you can see, actually that's something that we need to change here. Let's darken up the actual axis line itself. So you got it can be a challenge, but you need to get right on top of the axis. Okay. And right here it's color gray. No, I want it to be black, and I want it to be 1 point. So I'm changing the width and the color there, just to make it stand out more. Okay. Yeah, once we do that, you can see clearly where this axis is. You can see clearly where the tick marks are. I just want to replicate that on the other side. So I will do that. Again, we go, oops, need to put my tick marks in first, I suppose. Major tick marks on the outside, okay. And I need to go to my line and change the color from gray to black, and I'm going to up the width a little bit. Okay, Nice, simple, fairly easy to read, right? We can take a ruler and align these tick marks and come up with a score. Just, basically what we're looking for. Now the next thing that we may want to consider, had a little hiccup with my recording software there. Okay, so let's see, where were we? We had just addressed the tick marks. We darkened up the lines a bit. We've got everything in black and white. Now the next thing that we're going to usually want to have when we have some kind of a scatter plot like this, but not always, is perhaps we want to include the line of regression so that we have a visual indicator of the correlation. To do that, what we do is we make sure we have our chart selected, and what we're going to need to do is up here on where it says Chart Tools, we've got Design and Format as options. Go to Design, and then all the way on the left we go to Add Chart Element. Down here you'll notice one of our options is a trend line. All right, so a line of regression essentially is just a linear trend line. So that's what we're going to include, a linear trend line. Right? Now notice again we got a couple things. One, this is blue. Two, this is a bunch of a bunch of dots. I'm not too big of a fan with the blue. We definitely need to get rid of. That's going to be a publication issue. But in terms of the dots, I'm just more. I prefer straight lines, just a line. It doesn't have to be this thick though. We can get that a little bit smaller here, maybe. One should do it. Okay. So now we've got a line of regression there. Now if you wanted to try to extend this back closer to a y-intercept, and of course this would not be accurate because there are not zeros here, so you don't want to mislead people by making them believe that a y-intercept would occur running around maybe 156 or so. You probably wouldn't want to do that, but in case you need to, I'm going to show you how to do that. To make that happen, just select the line of regression that we have here. And over here under the trend line options, you'll notice we can forecast forward and backward. Right, so let's say I wanted to forecast an additional 10. Right, that will actually push it an additional 10. Now notice it changes your scaling here, which can be disruptive. You'd have to go back and change that back. I do not tend to like to use forecasting when showing a line of regression because it is misleading. If you mess with the scale down here on the x-axis or the y-axis. Okay, so there we have it. There's our basic scatter plot, complete with a line of regression, and basically a line of best fit is a better way to put it, I suppose, than a regression line, since we're talking about stats. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's kind of nice in Excel is you can display the equation, which can come in very handy for you in terms of calculating. Okay. Now, if you use SPSS or SAS, some other program, they will do all this for you. But this is actually one of the fastest ways you can come up with a line of best fit or a regression line. Right. It also gives you R squared, so it gives you some power as well. I can tell this is a pretty powerful line. 0.82, 0.83 basically is a pretty good indicator of power. You can also set the intercept, which I avoid because this is just for demonstration purpose, not a mathematical purpose. Okay. So now that we have all this, there's a couple other things that we can do to pretty this up. One of the things is these appear to be pretty small, so I'm going to see about changing their size a bit. I believe I can just go here. If you click on the axis and you go back to home, you can actually adjust it the way you would any other text information. Let's change that to 12. I'm going to go ahead and do it on this side. There we go. Okay. Now we have basically our figure. Now what we'll need to do is to transfer this to our word processing program. So I just select everything. I copy. Go in here into a fresh Word document. And just to make sure I'm good. Okay. And I paste it in. Okay. So looking at this, one of the things we need to get rid of is this light gray border. There shouldn't be any borders like this. So I'm going to do that. Go ahead and select the chart or click on the chart area. Okay. And what we're going to do is format the chart area. And border is what we're looking at here. I want nothing, no line. Okay, so I fix that. What's nice if you're working within Microsoft products is you can still do Excel editing while in Word, which is a handy thing to have. Okay, a couple things. Let's see, what else am I missing here? I am missing the axis titles. Okay, to get to axis titles, Again, make sure you're selecting on the chart so you can bring this Chart Tools option up. Go to Design, add Chart Element all the way on the left, and we want Axis Titles. We want one horizontal and one vertical. Right? So first we'll put the horizontal, and I'm trying to remember what order I had these in. So that would be score 1. Right? You're score 1, aren't you? Yeah, you're score 1. Okay. So this is simply going to be score 1. Again, simpler is better, always, always. And of course you can do this whole thing in Excel as well. I just wanted to demonstrate that you have options here if you're working with Microsoft Word while putting your charts together. This is score 2. Oop, did not mean to press enter. Okay. And what kind of size do we have on these guys? 10? Bring these up to 12 too. Okay, click on the body, and there we are. Pretty basic. Now, you may want to increase these or maybe decrease the size of these just to really make the title stand out a bit more. And I might do that. They just seem a little bit out of place, so I'll take those down to 10 on the axis. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So that's the essential elements for a scatter plot. Now, the last thing that we need to contend with is this is considered a figure. So in APA, we always announce our figure, and I don't know what number this would be, so I just use X. And oops, most schools in their own APA processing, every school kind of has their own different version of an APA for social sciences. With titles for figures, you want to make sure that you treat them exactly like titles. So let's see. All right, so notice a couple things I did. The whole thing is italicized. That's pretty typical. And each of the proper words here is capitalized, just like you would for a regular title. And double space, usually, is what will be called for. Now, I called this Test 1 and Test 2 because I just realized these are scores, yes, but they are scores of tests. So I want to get a little bit more specific about that. And also, one of the things that you can do is you can include a caption on the bottom to explain anything that needs to be a little bit more nuanced. Maybe you want to explain why the scaling was changed. And that is essentially done in a similar way, figure X, and then you explain. Test 1 comprised of items from X test for, I don't know, achievement or something, right? And then you just can continue on explaining all these things. Okay. Right. So in this case, for example, if we're wanting to wrap our heads around the data, when might you want to do a scatter plot? Well, there's a variety of situations, but in this case, for example, let's say I've got one test that's a standard test that we've been using for years, and I just invented another test, which is test 2. This would help me determine concurrent validity, right? If this test has been validated and my test is valid, then we would expect these two to correlate quite a bit. And this is a pretty strong positive correlation here. So that might be an application for the scatter plot in this case. Okay, so this essentially from beginning to end is how you can create a scatter plot and get it ready for publication presentation. Okay, if I do a quick print on this, let's see what it looks like. Right? And again, the whole goal here is as clean and easy as possible. Not lots of colors, not fancy backgrounds, nothing to take away from the eye, the basic bare bones nature of the data that we're trying to explain.